Today is April 21st. Welcome to Big Book Daily. My name is Rob. I am an alcoholic. It's a thrill, honor, and joy to be here with you today as we journey through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Today out of the Big Book, we're going to continue our personal stories out of Part 2, They Stopped in Time. Story number 7, Crossing the River of the Nile. We're going to be reading pages 330 through 333. And out of the 12 and 12, we are going to continue our journey through Step 12 by reading the first half of page 120. So with that, I hope you all are doing well today. We've been given another set of 24 hours. And, it's up to us and what we want to do with these 24 hours. It's up to us who we decide to be. So let's go ahead and get to the good stuff. All right, my friends. So if you remember out of the Big Book, our friend here is, first of all, she says a few things of note that I thought were pretty interesting. Once again, even though she has a father who's alcoholic, she doesn't complain about her upbringing. And this has to be at least the fourth or fifth person that had said that, which just goes to show you that, sometimes alcoholism has nothing to do with our upbringing. Now, some of it is genetic, of course, but speaking of her father, she talks about how she sees her father dying of alcoholism and how painful of a death that is. She also talks about how eventually her drinking, she's starting to black out way more often. And as a matter of fact, it starts to get her into legal trouble. And we talked about the awful, panicking feeling it is to wake up not knowing what you've done. So she is certainly, we can see that her life is becoming unmanageable here. So again, we are going to continue our story on page 330 and read up to page 333 today. Bottom of page 330. I remember joking about how most people spent their entire lives without ever seeing inside a jail. And here, a woman of my stature had been arrested 3 times. But I would think, I've never really done hard time, never actually spent the night in jail. Then I met Mr. Wrong, my husband-to-be, and all that changed. I spent my wedding night in jail. Like every other time, however, it wasn't my fault. There we were, still in our wedding clothes. If he had just kept his mouth shut after the police arrived, we would have been fine. I had them convinced that he had attacked the valet because our wedding money was missing. Actually, he thought the valet had stolen the marijuana that we were going to smoke. In reality, I was so drunk that I had lost it. During the interrogation of the valet in the restaurant parking lot, my husband became so violent the officer put him in the back of the patrol car. When he tried to kick out the rear windows, the policeman retaliated. I pleaded with the officer as a second policeman arrived, and both bride and groom were taken to jail. It was then that the stolen marijuana cigarettes were discovered, to my horror, in central booking as they cataloged my belongings. I was arrested for 3 felonies, including drunk and disorderly, and 2 misdemeanors. But it was all my husband's fault. I had practically nothing to do with it. He had the drinking problem. I stayed in that abusive marriage for nearly 7 years and continued to focus on his problem. Toward the end of the marriage, in my misguided attempts to set a good example for him, plus he was drinking too much of my vodka, I mandated no booze in the house. Still, why should I be denied a cocktail after returning home from a stressful day at the office just because he had a problem? So I began hiding my vodka in the bedroom, and still did not see anything wrong with this behavior. He was my problem. I accepted a transfer with a promotion. Yes, my professional life was still climbing. Shortly after the divorce, now I was sure that my problems were over, except that I brought me with me. Once alone in a new place, my drinking really took off. I did not have to be a good example anymore. For the first time, I realized that perhaps my drinking was getting a bit out of hand. But I knew you'd drink too if you had my stress. Recent divorce, new home, new job, didn't know anyone, and an unacknowledged progressive disease that was destroying me. Finally, I made some friends who drank just as I did. Our drinking was disguised as fishing trips and chili cook-offs, but they were really excuses for week-long binges. After a day's drinking disguised as softball, I nicked an old woman's fender driving home. Of course, it was not my fault. She pulled out in front of me. That the accident occurred at dusk and I had been drinking since 10 a.m. had nothing to do with it. My alcoholism had taken me to such depths of denial and heights of arrogance that I waited for the police so that they know that it was her fault too. Well, it didn't take them long to figure it out. Once again, pulled from the car, hands cuffed behind my back, I was taken to jail. But it wasn't my fault. The old broad shouldn't have been allowed on the road, I told myself. She was my problem. The judge sentenced me to 6 months in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was outraged. By now, I had been arrested 5 times. But all I could see was a hard partier, not an alcoholic. Didn't you people know the difference? So I started going to these stupid meetings and identified myself as an alcoholic so you'd sign my court card, even though I couldn't possibly be an alcoholic. I had 6-figure income, owned my own home. I had a car phone. I used ice cubes for God's sake. Everyone knows an alcoholic, at least one who had to go to AA, is a Skid Row bum in a dirty raincoat drinking from a brown paper bag. So each time you read that part in chapter 5 of the big book that says, if you decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, my ears closed. You had the disease of alcoholism, and the last thing I wanted was to be an alcoholic. Eventually, you talked about my feelings in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous until I could no longer close my ears. I heard women, beautiful, successful women in recovery, talk about the things that they had done while drinking. And I think, I did that. Or, I did worse than that. Then I began to see the miracles that happen only in AA. People who would nearly crawl in the doors, sick and broken, who in a few weeks of meetings and not drinking one day at a time would get their health back, find a little job, and friends who really cared, and then discover a God in their lives. But the most compelling part of AA, the part that made me want to try the sober thing, was the laughter. The pure joy of the laughter that I heard only from sober alcoholics. Still, the thought of getting sober terrified me. I hated the woman I'd become. A compulsive, obsessive, daily drinker. Not dressing on weekends. Always afraid of running out of alcohol. I'd start thinking about a drink by noon and would leave the office earlier and earlier. Or, promising myself that I wouldn't drink that night, I'd invariably find myself in front of a refrigerator with a drink in my hand, vowing tomorrow, I won't drink tomorrow. All right, my friends, so that's all the reading we're going to do in the big book today. Definitely want to come back to this in just a minute. Great stuff. All right, my friends, so out of the 12 and 12, we are continuing our journey through step 12, which is one of the longest chapters we've read of the book, but it's been great. Absolutely great stuff. So step 12 says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So this is definitely one of those lifetime steps. We are going to continue this thought by reading the first half of page 120. And what can be said of many AA members who, for a variety of reasons, cannot have a family life? At first, many of these feel lonely, hurt, and left out as they witness so much domestic happiness about them. If they cannot have this kind of happiness, can AA offer them satisfactions of similar worth and durability? Yes, whenever they try hard to seek them out. Surrounded by so many of AA's friends, these so-called loners tell us that they no longer feel alone. In a partnership with others, women and men, they can devote themselves to any number of ideas, people, and constructive projects. Free of marital responsibilities, they can participate in enterprises which would be denied to family men and women. We daily see such members render prodigies of service and receive great joys in return. All right, great stuff there. While that's fresh, the fellowships, the families that you make in the fellowships, they're unlike any other group of people I've ever been around. And I think it's because we all share the same common peril of alcoholism, but also the same common miracle of sobriety. And we know the good, the bad, and the ugly about each other. And yet we choose to be around each other. And we choose to listen to each other and be there for each other. And I know for a fact that some of the fellowship pray for me, and I pray for them. When somebody knows the good and the bad and ugly about me, and they still choose to be my friend, that means the world to me. It really does. You know, when I don't have to put on the mask, I've received that through the fellowships. I've gained a family through them. There's so many people I could list off that have taught me so much. There's one in particular I almost view as a father figure. He's the guy who always taught me to look up, to appreciate what's around me. Now, he's an old sailor, and he has a potty mouth, but he has a heart of gold. And he'd always say, "Rob, keep your bleeping head up." You know, he'd see me walk. Especially early on, I'd always had my head down. But, you know, these family members, like this one in particular, they know the good and bad and ugly about me. And they choose to be my friend, and they choose to help me and love me unconditionally. But the kind of honesty that you receive in these fellowships is beyond anything I'd personally ever experienced before. It's amazing. It really is. And going back to the big book real fast, buddy, I love the fact that this is called the River of Denial, because this woman is blaming everybody. She's blaming her husband. He's got the problem, you know, and that's why they're in jail on their wedding night. That's an interesting experience. And then, you know, later on, he's got the problem with vodka, and she's the one sneaking the drinks. And after a fifth time of being arrested, she's sentenced to go to AA. And then she starts to hear it. It's a similar theme in almost every story that we've read so far. She starts to hear the similarities, and she thinks to herself, "Oh, I've done that," or "I've done worse than that." She starts to get it. She starts to hear it. Now, here's the thing I was told when I first got in. You got to be willing to listen for the similarities. Oh, and excuse me, before that, she has the same thoughts about alcoholics that I did. You know, that you have to be the homeless man under the bridge, drinking, and you have to be that person in order to be an alcoholic. And that's not true at all. I've seen people from all walks of life come into the doors of any these recovery fellowships. I've seen teachers, doctors, nurses, all walks of life. And that was an old prejudice that I had that needed to be broken. And I love what she says here. One of the biggest things that drew her back to these meetings was laughter. You know, that same person I was telling you about that always told me to keep my head up, he always says, if you want to know which room has the meeting in it, just follow the laughter. Listen for the laughter. And buddy, he's right. None of these people in these meetings that I've been to take themselves too seriously. And, you know, sometimes we can chuckle and laugh at some of the things we've done. And it's good. In my experience, it hasn't been good to take myself too seriously. I have to laugh at myself sometimes. The disease, of course, is very serious. It's a matter of life and death. But at the same time, there's so much joy in sobriety. And so much gratitude that we can experience as well. So follow the laughter. That's what I keep telling myself. But guys, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for listening. It is a thrill. It really is a thrill and a joy for me to be here, and a great honor just to be here. And if you're sober today listening to this, please know that you're a miracle. And the people who love you are very proud of you. I'm proud of you. Because being sober takes a lot of willingness and honesty and work. So keep on keeping on, my friend. As always, I don't speak on behalf of AA, NA, any other sect or denomination, any religion. I am just a friend in recovery who loves the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Just a guy. And if we are given another set of 24 hours, I look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow.